Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to give some book recommendations for if you love The Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt or just the Witcher games in general. I did the same style video for if you love the lore of Elden Ring. I gave some book recs for that, so I'll have that video linked if you're interested, but jumping into it, I'm going to start with a series that likely doesn't need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway, just in case, which would be the Witcher books themselves. I think because of the popularity of the game at this point, a lot of people are aware, but just in case you're not, this does start with a collection of short stories, and then there's an additional collection of short stories, and then there's a main series. And then after that, there's what is kind of called a sidequel because it takes place before most of the main series events, but it was written after. So it's not quite a prequel, it's not quite a sequel, so that's why a lot of people call it a sidequel. Regardless, you also may likely already know this, but the events in the series take place before the events of the video games. The video games are not really considered canon. They are to a lot of fans though, but then on top of that, it's very much a what-if scenario for a continuation, what would occur after the events at the end of the series. If you are interested in getting into it, but you're a little daunted by the fact that there's so many, I would say just at least try the collections of short stories. I actually think that Sapkowski's writing and his storytelling style shines much more in short stories, and I don't usually like short stories or novellas, but I think he is a better short story writer than he is series writer. And I think that one of the things a lot of us fell in love with Witcher were the side quests. We were so impressed because we're so accustomed to quests being boring and pointless, and maybe you get an item, maybe you get a spell or something, but at the end of the day, it feels just kind of tedious, fetch quests. And these quests actually had really impactful, moving, tragic stories. Sometimes there was fun ones, sometimes there were silly ones, sometimes there were ones that had a ton of humor and heart in them. And it's part of why so many of us, like I said, fell in love with the game. I do think that the short stories are gonna feel the most like the quests that you get in the game. The main series is where you're going to get a plot line that is similar to the main quest of the video game, but I do think that the short stories are the best parts of Sapkowski's writing, so at the very least I would recommend the collection of short stories for the Witcher books. After that, I wanted to get into a couple that I think are the most obvious recommendations, or at least they are in my mind. One of them would be a manga series called Claymore. You will see in just a second how similar this is to Witcher if you haven't heard of it before. And then we have First Law and Godkiller. I'll go ahead and start with the First Law trilogy. And the biggest thing would be the tone. There's a sense of bleakness to the Witcher world. There's also a very funny way of writing that's kind of dry, and it almost takes you a second sometimes to realize that somebody was just saying something funny. But it's grimdark and humorous simultaneously, and I think Joe Abercrombie does that masterfully. He is one of the best. On top of all that, there is a quote, if I can find the exact quote, I'll put it on the screen, but there is a quote from Sapkowski saying that Abercrombie is either his favorite writer currently or he thinks he's the best fantasy writer currently, something of that sort. So basically, don't even listen to my recommendation. Listen to Sapkowski's. If you like the game, if you like the Witcher books and you've already read those, just know that Sapkowski himself is giving his, his approval to Abercrombie. This, if you're wondering, well, what's the plot? There's really not one. There's kind of a plot in hindsight. Once you get to the end of the original trilogy, you'll find that there were things happening throughout, but they're not really through the motivations of the characters. The characters are just living life, and their lives are not great. The main characters are Glokta, who is somebody who was previously tortured, and he himself is now somebody who tortures people for information, and you might be like, whoa, that sounds really dark. And you'd be surprised how weirdly funny Glokta's perspective is. When I first heard that, I was like, is everybody just an edgelord? But really, Glokta is very funny. There's very much an element of, doesn't it suck to have a boss with Glokta's perspective? Anyway, and then you follow Logan Ninefingers, who is somebody who clearly has a past, and he's known for being this violent individual, but you don't really see it because he actually seems kind of nice, and so you're discovering more about him as the story goes on. Then you follow somebody who is just such a dumb pretty boy, and he's a soldier, but he's mostly just training, and he doesn't really know the hardships of life, and he's very self-absorbed. And this might not sound appealing at all, but I promise First Law is great. Highly recommend, especially if you like the tone of Witcher and if you like the humor of Witcher. After that, I mentioned a second ago that you will see the comparison right away as soon as I describe the plot of the manga series Claymore. This is a story about women who have had modifications to their makeup to make them better suited to fight monsters. And they are also somewhat feared and not treated with the utmost respect by society. But their jobs revolve around killing monsters. And our main character, Claire, she is kind of similar to Geralt in that she just goes about her job. She looks to just be employed to go kill monsters and then leave to the next place that needs her services, that requires her expertise. And then there's a lot more to the plot once you get through it. It doesn't just revolve around this awesome character killing monsters, but you don't really see the big plot for a while, but when it does start to unfold, it starts to become quite interesting, I gotta say. And there's a lot of really cool fight scenes and stuff in Claymore. After that, we have Godkiller. If your favorite part of Witcher is the relationship, the mentor-mentee relationship between Geralt and Ciri, and you're like, I wish I got even more of that, pick up Godkiller. This follows a woman who is a Godkiller. Not a monster hunter, but a Godkiller. She has so many parallels to Geralt. I was actually like, am I reading Witcher? Because she is somebody who a lot of people, as soon as she'll walk into town, as soon as she'll walk into a building, people give her a look. Some people respect her, some people hate her, but she's just looking to get some coin and go on about her day. And she's very rough around the edges. She's not really looking to make friends. She doesn't care if she bothers you. She doesn't care what you think of her. And at some point, she meets a young girl who is accustomed to being kept hidden away and is a little oblivious when it comes to the ways of the world and just how dangerous the world can be. And these two pair together because this young girl has a bond to a god, which should be impossible. Gods really only ever bond to shrines. However, this god has bonded to this young girl, and she cares very much. It's like an animal companion. She cares very much for the god, but she also cannot really separate from him. If they even go a little distance away from each other, they'll be in a lot of pain. And so both of them are looking to try and end this bond, and our main character is someone who she thinks maybe she'll know the answers, and so that's how you see the two of them come together. There are some other characters that pop up, but I would say those are the two ones that, if you like Witcher, and like I said, the Geralt-Ciri bond, that bond, it's great. And I'll also add, if you've read the Witcher series and you're like, I get frustrated with how little we see of Geralt and Ciri, that's one of the complaints about the Witcher books, Godkiller, it's like remedying that. After that, some of the ways that I'm comparing these are down to specifics. So obviously there's a lot of roots in the Witcher world with folklore and with monsters. And if that's something very appealing to you with that medieval Eastern European feel, then I would definitely recommend The Bear and the Nightingale. I don't think I've read anything else that captures the fear of some of these monsters and just how frightening they are. I don't think I've read something really that does that better than The Bear and the Nightingale. The story itself is not like Witcher, but I would say that that element, the monster element, the folklore element, is done really well here. Also, Witcher does feel in some ways like historical fiction, even though you're not reading about our own world. And this one has that historical fiction feeling as well. So if you like the monsters, Bear and the Nightingale. I could say similar things about Spinning Silver. The additional added thing with Spinning Silver is this is a retelling. I guess you could say it's like a grim fairy tale retelling. And Witcher, does that not describe Witcher so well? There's all these really strange forces, and there's these strange beings and these strange monsters, some of which are just compelled by their desire to eat, and then others that are just as intelligent as other human beings, and they are looking to actually manipulate people, and they're looking to use people for their own gain. And you see very clever enemies in this, but that are kind of in the shadows, and they're looking to be set free, or they're looking to gain more power. And then sometimes the ones that you're interacting with are fae, basically, but they have their own code of conduct, if you will, and they're very different from people, but they can interact with people, and they do have a lot of significance with the environment. It feels very, very folklore. Spinning Silver is great, and I know this is a silly thing to say, but the artwork itself, especially this image, to me, I just think that just makes me think of Witcher. I don't know if that's the same for a lot of you, but I find there's quite a few similarities there in those aspects. Next up, we have Nettle and Bone. So what I was describing about Abercrombie with the First Law trilogy, where there is that sense of bleakness, but also there's a lot of humor, that is true for Nettle and Bone as well. I would say it's much more humorous than it is bleak. The bleakness is more so tied to it having a very, very grim fairy tale feel, where the main character, her entire motivation is to try and rescue her sister from a very abusive marriage. This marriage cannot be broken, though, because it is a political alliance, and our main character's kingdom needs this alliance desperately to maintain any semblance of peace and protection. So everybody just has to basically deal with the fact that Mara, this is the main character, that her sister is being treated horrifically. And Mara is not somebody who's content with this. However, she recognizes she can't just go kill the guy and she can't just go rescue her sister. So she has to figure out what she's going to do. And she does her best, and she kind of collects a merry band of misfits, and then they're on their way to try to solve this problem. And it's that, like I said, that combination of there being darker elements, but then also having a lot of humor in the story that I think you might have a lot of fun with Nettle and Bone. It's also very, very short, so that's fun. The last couple are the least like Witcher, I would say, but I just wanted to throw them out there. Maybe you're not looking for something that's exactly the same. Maybe you just want something that you think sounds fun. So, Art of Prophecy, I think this series, tone, humor, completely different from Witcher. I've said many times that this feels like watching a Jackie Chan movie in book form. But the reason I'm mentioning it is just because of the mentor-mentee relationship and the way in which the idea of the chosen one child, the way that the usual tropes that you see with that, or I should say the way in which that trope usually plays out, it gets flipped on its head and your expectations are subverted, which is exciting and fun. Other than that, though, it's not all that similar, but I do think that it's fun, and I could see people that like one liking the other. Last, I'm going to describe this as, what if a Yennefer type of character was partnered with Dandelion, and they had to go learn about some fae. And that would be an Encyclopaedia of Faeries. Maybe, do I want to say Yennefer? Maybe the main character is more like Triss. It's just, I don't like Triss, so I don't even want to bring her up. But the main character is very studious and very much to herself, and she's not unpleasant. She just isn't very social. And her job, she's in academia, and she is researching the fae. And the fae are not sexy fae, like what you see in a lot of fantasy romance books or anything, but the fae in this are frightening. They're much more like what you find in The Bear and the Nightingale. And you will see some of the things that she ends up studying, excuse me, she's stunning. No, some of the things that she ends up studying, some of the fae and the way that they're affecting humans, it reminds me of some of the really tragic stories that you get in the Witcher side quests. So that element is a little bit there, and then having a character that's kind of endearing but a bit of a bumbling idiot would be one of the characters that accompanies our main character. It's really not that close, but it's really fun. If you're looking for something fun that has that almost short story element, because this is written in journal entry form, and so the main character is documenting her encounters with the fae and how they affect the humans. So sort of what I was saying before about if you like the side quest part when I was describing the short stories of Witcher, then you might like Encyclopaedia of Faeries. It's really fun. Very different time period, though. Anyway, that's it for some books that if you like The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, or you could say maybe the Witcher books themselves, then try these out. I'll have all of these linked in the description bar down below. I mentioned before that if you like the Elden Ring lore book recs video, so I'll have that linked as well. But anyway, let me know if you have any of your own recommendations for going from the Witcher games to reading some books or picking up some manga. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.